Hello and good morning, everybody. This is Dr. Fresh Hour here with the Fresh Start Initiative. And today I'm going to answer some of your questions on obesity, actually. So before I do that, here's my website, startfreshmd.com, and you can check out my plans, my videos, including this one will be there, articles that I've written, and the donation button, which always works. So here's a little basic intake form that you can fill out, or you can just email me here or send me a text or call me. It's a pretty simple setup. The first little talk that we have, little consultation, that's totally free. I'll send you a little form to fill out, and then we take it from there. And actually, the first week is free too. So, yeah, don't be shy. And if you have anybody that you think might be a good fit, let me know, and we'll get in touch and just see how it goes. So, the questions of today's video are: what is your opinion on childhood obesity? Is it genetic? What can parents do to establish healthy food habits in their children? And how can parents with an already obese child help them eat healthier and be more active without creating a self-image complex like body dysmorphia or something like that for the child that could affect them in life? And it wouldn't just be, usually it's not just body dysmorphia. The body dysmorphia leads to some form of an eating disorder, anorexia, bulimia, like binge and purge type stuff. Not always, but I mean, there's associations. So before we jump into is it my opinion on it and is it genetic, let's look at the facts. So as per the CDC, we go from 2 to 5 years to 19, it goes from 13.4% all the way up to 21.2. But finding the actual overweight statistics is a little bit more difficult. But adults, it's not as difficult. So as we see here, obesity is 42.4% in adults. But what's their overweight status? I don't know, right? So let's check this out. NIH, so government study, so not a lot to argue with here. For all men and women, overweight or obesity is around 70.2%. So these numbers are a little different than the CDC, but they're close, right? We're not really going to pick apart that. So in a sense, you can usually around double it, maybe a little less than double it. So if 42.4% of our adults, a little less than double, 70%. So if we have 20%, a little less than double, I don't know, we have somewhere between 30-35% of kids are overweight or obese, and that's probably being very generous. So back to the questions. What is my opinion on childhood obesity? Well, my opinion on childhood obesity is we spend a lot of our focus on the actual children and not as much of a focus on the parents. Is it genetic? There are some genetic markers associated with obesity or being overweight, but I like to think a lot of us are looking for excuses for why we are that way or why we know people that way or why people are that way, because that makes you feel better. It doesn't necessarily, it removes a little bit of personal responsibility or accountability, which we all really like that. I mean, well, some of us do. We're not perfect, right? So before I give my overall opinion and if it's genetic, here's a little article right here on, let's see, where is this? This article is called The Effects of Maternal Obesity on the Offspring, NIH.gov government study here. So here's some of the main points that I took, and there's a few. So here we go. Let's go through this. Excess gestational weight gain is associated with the risk for both the infant and the mother. In approximately 2/3 of U.S. pregnancies, weight gain exceeds the Institute of Medicine guidelines. So there's a certain amount of weight you're supposed to gain. In 2/3 of pregnancies, the mom is exceeding that. So excess gestational while you're pregnant weight gain is associated with fetal macrosomia, which just means big baby, like over a certain threshold of weight, and increased risk for developing childhood obesity. So if mom gains too much weight or is already too overweight when she is pregnant, there is an association or an increased risk of having a big baby. And that big baby is associated with an increased risk of having an obese baby. So macrosomic or big infants are at an increased risk of obesity in childhood and adulthood compared to normal birth weight infants. And we just said that the birth weight is actually dictated heavily by how big the mom is. So thus, more optimal gestational weight gain decreases the risk for high birth weight. And I think that's really funny because we all want to know, is it genetic? But at the same time, why are we asking that question whenever there's something way more obvious? Obesity is rampant, like over 75% or something like that of all adults over the age of 20 are overweight. So if we have that many overweight people, there's a very high likelihood that most of these overweight or obese kids are born to mothers who are overweight or obese. And we just showed a direct correlation between mom's weight and baby's weight, but we want to point to genetics, which is kind of interesting. So it's well documented that many women increase caloric intake and decrease physical activity during pregnancy. Yeah, you want to be careful. You don't want to, I don't know, go spelunking, rock climbing, cave diving, or something like that while you're pregnant, right? But in a sense, you should be extremely active while you are pregnant, but just doing what they call like low intensity exercises. So curbing excess gestational while you're pregnant weight gain has been associated with a lower risk of childhood overweight. Associated with a lower risk of childhood overweight? I don't know if that's a typo or if that's just proper grammar. I can't read it. So this is true even when first and second trimester weight gain have exceeded the recommended guidelines. So whenever you stop gaining so much weight when you're pregnant, it's associated with a lower risk of your kid being overweight. And if your kid is not overweight when he's born, he's less likely to be overweight when he's older. If your kid is born and he's overweight, he's more likely to be overweight or obese as he ages. Low birth weight infants, this is actually interesting. If you're low birth weight, they're just as it's actually associated with an increased risk of developing the obesity or being overweight because there's such a rapid period of catching back up. Kind of interesting. So infants with individual weight gain trajectories continue on a consistent path from prenatal into postnatal life. So the effect of gestational weight gain on the infant continues after birth. So how much weight mom gains during the pregnancy continues after birth. So let's see. Excess gestational weight gain not only presents health risks for the mother during pregnancy, labor, and delivery, but also significant increased risk for postpartum weight retention. We all like to get back to our pre-pregnancy weight, especially before we have another baby, but when you gain too much weight during your pregnancy, it's a lot harder to take it off, and it's really more likely that you're going to almost develop a new normal, right? And you'll have this little opinion in your head of what you used to be. So, which is super damaging psychologically, and just how you feel. So furthermore, return to pre-pregnancy weight is important, not only for the mother's health, but also the health of her future infants, because we've just shown that the mother's health or weight during the pregnancy is very well directly correlated with baby's weight. So the mother's postpartum weight often becomes her pre-pregnancy weight for the next pregnancy. Okay, we kind of gave that one away, I guess. Let's see, if women are already overweight or obese, retaining substantial postpartum weight, and then becoming pregnant again puts both her and the offspring at greater risk. Studies have shown that mild to moderate interpregnancy weight loss in obese mothers may decrease the risk of subsequent large for gestational age or macrosomic infants without necessarily increasing the risk for small gestational age. So just because you're pregnant and you're losing weight, it's not necessarily increasing the risk to have a small baby, but it does make you less likely to have a big baby. So as such, the postpartum phase and the interpregnancy interval are crucial for promoting maternal weight loss, which may directly contribute to offspring weight outcomes. They like to use words like may and all this stuff. It's like you don't want to ever speak too absolutely, especially in science, because someone will come along and say how wrong you are. So let's see here. Let's go back to this. So my opinion on childhood obesity is that it is the result of, I don't know, you can go back as far as the food pyramid, what we learned in health class. I don't even know if they still have health class now. People thinking breakfast is the most important meal of the day, that grains are good for you, and lower your cholesterol, despite when you increase your grains, you're less likely to eat meat and saturated fats like animal proteins, which are high in cholesterol in the first place. So is it the grains really lowering your cholesterol, or is it the fact that you're probably just not eating as much because you think it's bad? When in reality, having a diet high in carbohydrates, especially simple carbohydrates and sugar, is just as likely to raise your cholesterol, your bad cholesterol, your LDL. And you can even go further and say what's really important with cholesterol. Well, it's the HDL to LDL ratio that's actually the most important. But is obesity genetic? Yes, there are genetic components to obesity in certain populations of people. You can go into socioeconomic status, education level, all of this, but at the end of the day, it's like, is it genetic? Is it in the genome? Is there something in my genes that says, hey, you're fat? I think you have to turn your head a little bit. There are definitely some pathologies or diseases associated that have obesity kind of as an outcome, mostly related to cortisol defects or insulin receptor defects or insulin insensitivities or sensitivities. Not super duper common. Obviously overplayed a lot, kind of like thyroid issues and stuff, which can also be associated with obesity. Because in reality, you have cortisol, insulin, and thyroid. Those are the three hormones in charge of almost all obesity. Thyroid's like the master metabolic hormone, Insulin is basically get sugar out of my bloodstream and into my body. And then cortisol is more like a stress hormone, but it's catabolic in nature to burn fat. You need it to burn fat. But excessively chronically elevated cortisol, like our daily lives of high stress, super associated with obesity. And if you want to look into that, look into Cushing's disease or Cushing's syndrome from having an elevated cortisol, sometimes due to like pituitary adenomas and stuff like that. Obese. So is it genetic? There is a genetic component to it, but most of the time, mom is overweight, so baby is overweight. And that is a hard pill to swallow, and I feel like it's not preached enough. And I don't like that word preach. It's not really talked about enough. It's almost like taboo to say, hey, well, you're really overweight, borderline fat, maybe obese. If you have a baby right now, he's most likely, or she's most likely, or if you're doing a non-gender reveal or whatever, going to be obese or overweight and have a trajectory like a growth curve that is that way. So, what can new parents do to establish healthy food habits in their children? First of all, they can have healthy food habits on their own before getting pregnant, but that's not always the case. So, you get pregnant, what do? It just showed right there that if you lose weight while you are pregnant, or curb the excess weight gain, it can positively impact your pregnancy and your baby. So, before even having the baby, establish the healthy food habits and exercise habits. Improving your insulin sensitivity and not gaining too much weight is probably one of the best things that you can do. After you've already had the baby, let's say you didn't do any of these things. Well, you're kind of like, it's like you made your bed, now you're laying in it type of situation. Your baby's already been exposed to more insulin while it was inside you than it probably would have been exposed to in years of life. And insulin, over time, elevated levels of insulin are going to cause obesity. That's just how it works. So, because you become insensitive to it, your blood sugar stays elevated and you grow bigger. That's kind of a really short and quick and dirty reason why. So if you're going to fight that, I would say try and have as much high protein, natural carbohydrates, avoid the simple sugars. Soft drinks, not necessarily a great idea. A lot of fruit drinks, especially if you buy the super fake stuff, the artificial is it's just sugar. Reducing sugar as much as you can. Having natural sugars, obviously, because in the state that most fruits are in, there's a lot of sugar. There's also a lot of fiber and vitamins in them that we like to get rid of when we juice things, and some people don't even like pulp. That's fiber. Sorry. Just the standard healthy diet. High protein, low carbs, lower carbs, or healthier carbs. Lower or more natural sugar. I would say eliminating snacks, because snacking just constantly tells your kid that he can get away with eating whenever he wants, when in reality, establishing a baseline level of habitual ceremonial eating habits at a youth or young age is going to carry over as an adult. If you don't snack all the time growing up, you're not going to snack as you're older, or you're less likely to. If you don't save room for dessert, you might not do that as you're older. You might not even like dessert when you're older. And maybe you won't view it as this like massive game-winning prize, and just something that you have a little bit of. So portion control, that can be important too, but just focusing on having more protein, more real foods. I ate tons of carbs growing up. I had lasagna like 500 times a week, but I was never overweight. My mom was never overweight, so that was directly correlated with me not being overweight. She was active while she was pregnant, which all that did was help me. So if you didn't do any of those things and you already had the overweight child and you're trying to figure out how to correct this, start with correcting yourself. The more that you do to correct your overweightness or obeseness, it's going to translate to your kid, because they obviously make what food you give them, unless it's just all school lunch, which school lunches are kind of good, but I don't know. You can't really blame them for all of the mistakes that we have made, or maybe will made. I know that might be a little harsh, but get them outside. Stop letting everybody be inside and staring at a screen all day. Fortnite's great, maybe set a certain amount of time for that after they've already done their homework, and maybe went outside, exercise. I know that the pandemic can't go outside, but kids are the least likely to be affected and or die or have any serious complications whatsoever. And vitamin D deficiency associated with being inside all the time is going to be shown to be just as detrimental as getting the virus in the first place. So I kind of feel like I addressed all this, but honestly, as far as helping eat healthier and be more active without creating a self-image complex, that is really brought on by culture, the media, Hollywood, whatever. in the being happy in your own skin, dare I say, like fat acceptance and all that stuff. You should obviously accept everybody. It's not your place to judge or be rude or condescending to anyone depending upon their weight. That doesn't matter. You should always be confident in your own skin, but you should use that confidence to improve your health. I don't care if somebody's overweight. I do care if somebody's obese, because if you're obese, eventually you'll get diabetes, metabolic syndrome, high blood pressure. Clothes are going to be hard to find, and then the psychiatric side of that is what follows. And sometimes, the psychiatric aspect is first, and then the obesity and overweightness follows. But if you establish positive, healthy, beneficial habits as a baby and a kid with regular meals, maybe not emphasizing breakfast as much. If you have a picky eater, realize that they're not always going to be a picky eater. Proof. Getting them outside, getting them active, making them try and take advantage of the day, getting as many things done throughout the day, getting up early, having a set bedtime, rules, things that you have, like a schedule. As adults, we're so bad with schedules, but a lot of that has to do with when we were kids, and establishing these kind of principles and these things that we have to do because they carry over into adult life. And to say that they don't is silly, because just being not overweight or losing weight while you're pregnant, even if you're already overweight or obese, is going to it's directly impacting the weight of your child. So, not to be too preachy, I apologize if I've been condescending in any way, shape, or form. But what you do before you're pregnant is what really matters. What you do while you're pregnant also matters, almost just as much. I don't know, they don't really do a direct comparison, right? And then once you've already had the baby, it's not like you just throw up your hands and say, well, we lost this one, on to the next one. No, like, it's your kid. You got to take care of them. Maybe start working on yourself, because you can't take care of somebody if you can't take care of yourself. And kids, as much as we want to admit and say that they rebel all the time, as far as eating habits are concerned, they do mimic us in a lot of ways. And snacking all the time is just seeing a kid snack. Drinking all the time is just a kid seeing somebody drink and thinking it's okay. Procrastinating all the time is just a kid seeing procrastination and thinking it's okay. That's a lot of soapboxes all in one, I know. And I just want you guys to know at the end of all of this that you do have a lot of control over your kids' weight. If they're already overweight or obese, it's not the end of the world. You can reverse it. They're kids. It just takes a little bit more effort. Make them move more. Get rid of the sweets. Make them, I don't even want to say make them a reward of any kind. Just let them realize and tell them, hey, this is really bad for you. And if you're eating them, they're going to be like, well, it's obviously not that bad for me. Hence all smoking parents who have kids. Anyway, that is kind of my soapboxy, summed up opinion on childhood obesity and its genetic component, and maybe some things that parents can do to establish healthier behaviors and habits in their children. And I think it starts before you're pregnant. If you're already pregnant, you can start there. If you've already had the baby, then you can start there. But yeah, I like to point the finger right back at me or you or whatever. It all starts with us. So that is my little video for the day. I am Dr. Freshour with the Fresh Start Initiative, and I hope you guys have a great day. And send me more questions, because I love doing these. So take care. See ya.